Hello there YouTube, it's B.P.R.D back with another kicking graphic novel review. Today we're back on some Dark Horse in the MIGNOLAVERSE. Today we are looking at B.P.R.D. Omnibus, Volume 1. Yes, this is the next book in my HELLBOY MIGNOLAVERSE, HELLBOY universe, whatever you want to call it, reading order. I've read it a couple times, once when I first got it, just to read it, and then a second time for the review, and both times were very enjoyable. It is a very good book. This is kind of where it falls away from being mostly Mignola art. There's a good bit of Mignola art in this, but then in Volume 2, which I'm almost finished with, there's barely any Mignola art. But Mignola has a hand in all of the stories in the MIGNOLAVERSE, hence the name. Right? Right. So it's mainly Mike Mignola and Christopher Golden working on this book. But let me read you the back of it real quick, eh? Also, by the way, usually I don't read the back of the book until I've already read it through once. A lot of the time, the backs of books have spoilers. That's often less likely with omnibuses like this one because there's too much ground to cover. But in 2001, HELLBOY quit the B.P.R.D., leaving its roster of special agents to defend the world from any occult threats and the growing menace of the Frog Army. Now their adventures are collected in one continuous saga, following the exploits of Abe Sapien, Liz Sherman, Roger the Homunculus, Johann, don't skewer me if I call him John on accident or something. Anyway, Johann Kraus, Kate Corrigan, Ashley Strode, and many more, from the Plague of Frogs to the end of Ragnarok. Join HELLBOY creator Mike Mignola and a slew of talented writers and artists as they bring you the main collection of B.P.R.D. stories in a series of 10 volumes. This one is gonna take me a while. Yikes. So, let's go to the beginning. Alright? First up is a story called Hollow Earth. This is when Johann kind of joins the team here. We get like a little recap of HELLBOY's leaving. We see Liz go hang out with some monks in a monastery to learn to control her pyrokinetics, you know? Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. I mean, not really, but she stays there for quite a while. And they welcome Johann Kraus to the B.P.R.D, the B.P.R.D. And this is a guy who, during an eldritch incident, was doing a seance when things kind of went wonky worldwide. And he's like an actual, real medium, not one of the fake ones, which do still exist in HELLBOY's world. I guess fake mediums are more likely to exist in a world where spirits and ghosts and stuff are confirmed to exist. So I feel like fake mediums might exist more when people know it's like a possibility. Does that make sense? I hope so. But since he was kind of projecting outside his body, when it happened, his body was fried, but his spirit was left here, and he's kind of something new. He's not like a ghost exactly. He is a soul trapped on Earth. For some reason, he's not a ghost. There's a lot of small specifics. But he's not dead, technically. Like, he's in this containment suit, but if he were to leave it and stay out of it too long, he would disperse in the wind and, like, lose consciousness, but he technically wouldn't move on to the other side. Though I think he could if he wanted, interestingly enough. So yeah, he's not quite a ghost. Something new. I don't know if we're really going to put a finger on that at some point, but, I mean, hey, I've got over 8 volumes to go. So, great. But we see Liz with much more firepower control later on, and something's happening at this monastery she's at. There's a lot of lore about the Hollow Earth going on, and Abe is considering leaving the B.P.R.D. because HELLBOY left, and it doesn't feel the same, you know, without HELLBOY there, but also he doesn't feel safe because they were going to blow up Roger, and it's like, are they willing to sacrifice all of their non-human beings? But then he gets like a psychic fire message from Liz, and he's like, well, obviously I have to go on a mission to save my bestie, of course. They go to the monastery, they find all the monks slaughtered. And these monks, I suppose, are descendants of an ancient civilization that came up from the Hollow Earth, and they were split off, and then the other beings descended from this civilization, became like these little slave gremlin things down in the Hollow Earth. Some of them have intelligence, some of them don't. It's very interesting, but this is also Johan's first time in the field. It's not Roger's first time in the field, but he's still getting used to things, you know. Roger the homunculus, very cool. And he feels connected to Liz because he did kind of steal her life force and stuff before, and he really wants to help her because he feels like he hasn't fully repaid his debt to her and whatnot. But, yeah, we see Abe's first interaction with Hellboy. That's very cool. And then we find all these machines down in the Hollow Earth. And they're digging through them, and they seem kind of ancient, but then they find a swastika. That's right, it's the Nazis, bitch. The enemy of pulp stories. Yeah. By the way, if you like the Hellboy world and you like pulp stories, I have reviewed some other pulp books like The Shadow and also Soul War, which is a kaiju pulp book. Just so you know. But, yeah, it turns out the Nazis were fucking around down here, but they do appear to be gone. There's like all these horrible skeletons and big mech-looking robots. And it turns out Liz has been captured because her flame is going to be used to power these robots and this ritual sword that will let this man, who seems to have become a little corrupted. He was initially a freedom fighter. He freed all these creatures from slavery, killed their ancient masters. That's all cool, but he also wants to take over the surface world, and then they be the slave masters. You had such a good thing going, bud. You were a hero, and then you pushed it too far. But we also see Liz's first interaction with Hellboy when she was just a little girl. Very interesting. It shows how empathetic and stuff Hellboy was, and really reinforces how much the B.P.R.D. has lost now that he's gone. Not just in firepower, but in empathy towards supernatural beings. Which one could argue is why it's more important for supernatural beings to stay at the B.P.R.D. to make sure that things stay kosher. You know what I mean? You get it? Okay, good. Moving on. So, this guy who wants to enslave the surface world, classic Hollow Earth villain motivation. He gets his flaming sword, which controls all of the machines that Liz has powered. Luckily, they are able to free Liz from this machine, and they do defeat this guy. He acts like he's going to be all-powerful, but then they just shoot him in the back. It's that admittedly doesn't kill him, but it does enough. And yeah, basically they confirm Hollow Earth theory by coming out of the Earth on like the opposite side of the planet they were on. But yeah, now Liz is back on the team. Very fun. Anyway, we get kind of Johan's origin, which I sort of already gave you, but now it's being shown in the book. And then we see how Roger got woken back up by Abe Sapien. Abe kind of did a very similar thing for Roger that Hellboy did for him. So you can see how Abe has kind of taken Hellboy's place in many ways at the B.P.R.D., which is good. It needed to be done. But this, after this story, is where we start to lose Mignola's art. Mike Mignola is one of the greatest comic artists of all time, one of the greatest monster artists of all time. I can confidently say that. His art is incredible. It's unique, but you can completely understand everything that's going on. It's beautiful. I love the way he sets up his panels. I love everything about his art. But Mignola's a busy guy, and with the Hellboy universe ever expanding, he can't draw every page of every book, especially at indie publisher Dark Horse Comics. So, even though every speck of art he's done for Hellboy and stuff is incredible, we do move a little away from him. We see these ships where all these sharks surround them, and then someone gets possessed and jumps into the ocean after attacking people. And Abe and a psychic are sent to investigate. This psychic, he doesn't really super matter. Like, we don't see him again for the rest of the volume, and I have not seen him again in volume 2, so I assume he was just kind of a one-off character. Maybe he'll come back as a deep pull one day. But oh well. Anyway, he gets possessed by this African spirit, and it turns out that many slaves during the slave trade would jump off boats in this area, committing themselves to the waters because they preferred that to being enslaved, and who could blame them, honestly? You know, I'm not praising self-harm or anything, obviously. But I am saying slavery's horrible, and the boats were horrible, and once again, you can't blame them. So, Abe Sapien, thank goodness he was on this mission, swims down and finds the chained together bodies of these slaves, and he's able to take them back to Africa for burial so that their spirits can be at rest and that these shipping lanes can be safe. It's actually a pretty good story. I quite liked it. But also I want to say the art is still pretty good. It makes Abe look a little more monstrous in some ways than Mignola's art, but no less human, which is pretty good. But we do still get a lot of Mignola cover arts, so don't worry about that. They will not be in short supply. Anyhow, then we go to kind of like Venice, and it is a horrible, polluted mess. It's disgusting. The goddess that keeps the waters clean just hasn't been around in a long time. It's so disgusting, Abe can barely swim in it, and when he does, he has to stay like in isolation in super clean water for a long time. Like a month the last time he did it. And the waters are acting in strange ways, and they tell the story of this hedonistic guy who became friends of a vampire, and when the vampire wouldn't turn him, he tortured the vampire until he was able to make himself a vampire. And now he's kind of haunting this whole place, including his previous residents, and he seems to be a bit more powerful than your average vampire. Actually, a good bit more powerful. And there's this very insane bat that he summons that has like human bones and tibbies. He's got Tibble Bigleys. Anyway, this guy summons a devil, and he's like, "Hey, yo, Lord Shax, give me some demon powers. I have this goddess in a bottle." Yes, it is the same goddess. "I have her in a bottle. You can devour her and give me demon powers." And the god is like, "Yeah, I mean, that's a cool gift and all, but why would I give you demon powers, you undead freak?" Pretty funny. Classic devil behavior. Roger kind of ends up freeing the devil from the summoning by destroying the summoning circle when he fights the vampire. And the devil's like, "Hey, thanks for that. You're a cool guy. Tell Hellboy I said what's up." Pretty cool. But also Roger has a little crush on the goddess. Yeah. And she's free, and Venice's waters become much cleaner. If only we had goddesses to clean our waters in real life. Or at least a Suicune, you know? And now we go to Shiloh, Massachusetts. It's in New England, close to where the Salem witch trials were. And in the world of Hellboy, the Salem witch trials were still done entirely on innocent women. Even in this world where witches are real, the Salem witch trials were not. None of the witches there were actually witches. They were all innocent women accused of crimes simply because they were women. And they're draining this old pond in the town because they want to put something new and beautiful there. And some people are like, this is kind of destroying history. And some people are like, that pond is gross, it stinks, we got to get rid of it. Or at least clean it up and replace it with a clean pond, which is what I would do. But they drain it, and there's 3 young women chained to the bottom of it. They're all in period clothing from the Salem witch trials. But they're also all perfectly preserved, and they smell like roses. And according to Abe Sapien, divine magic, divine supernatural stuff often smells like roses, which is actually very interesting lore, I have to say. But they go to this pastor in town, and his church has better records than like the city itself because it's so old and has kept records on everything. And he's like, yeah, during the Salem witch trials, which were kind of adjacent to us, these three were tried as witches because their plants grew better than everybody else's. That's the only reason. And they were killed, but the town kind of felt ashamed about it after. Like, they figured it out a lot faster than Salem. They just had this one triple witch killing, and then they kind of decided to never speak of it again. But in deciding that, they also rob these women of justice. You know, if the town had admitted it was wrong and pulled them out of the pond and gave them a proper burial with proper rites, their spirits would not be restless. They would have forgiven the town. But they kind of weren't given that. The town just buried it. And then across the street from this more progressive church is a regressive church with a pastor whose last name is, of course, Blackwood. Whenever a pastor has a last name Blackwood, he's evil. Usually just if the word wood is in there. But yeah, he goes and this horrible vengeance thing kind of possesses him in a way, giving him these weird mud powers. And he's like, I'm going to turn this town Christian again. And he lays into this, you know, more progressive pastor. And he's like, how dare you let people get divorced? And he also welcomes gay people into his church, which this pastor has a problem with. And he is even mad that this pastor allows dancing. I mean, dancing in the church is going to be dancing that praises God. I never understood that not being allowed. I've never understood churches that don't like that. That's just insane to me. But our more progressive pastor is about forgiveness. And this other pastor, Blackwood, he's about vengeance. He's very Old Testament. And our other pastor is very New Testament, you know? But yeah, they have to fight off his mud powers. And he goes and he throws these witches in the sea. And they float. So he's like, see, they float. Witches float. And the sheriff's like, hey, dumbass, dead bodies float, man. The chains have been taken off of them. So they're not going to sink, right? They're dead bodies. They float. Anybody can tell you that. But while they're fighting Blackwood, the pastor is giving them funeral rites, a burial at sea. And this appeases them. But when Blackwood jumps in to stop it, they drown him and bury him with them. Hopefully he will not come back as a vengeful spirit. That would not be kosher. And then we get into a story called Night Train. And this one is very interesting because it's written by Jeff Johns. Yeah, Jeff Johns is probably one of the most famous comic writers ever. One of the most famous living comic writers, for sure. And writer of my favorite comic run of all time, the Jeff Johns Green Lantern run. Yeah, really, truly. And we've reviewed a lot of his work on this channel, and we'll be reviewing a lot more. But yeah, Jeff Johns and Scott Collins wrote this, with art by Scott Collins and Dave Stewart, and letters by Pat Brosseau, something French. But this one's extra pulpy, because the beginning of it takes place in Colorado in 1939, on a train. And running atop the train is Lobster Johnson. Yeah, the Lobster. He's kind of a pulp hero that existed in the Hellboy universe, like a pulp hero's pulp hero, you know? And he also has his sidekick, and they're chasing this Nazi bastard who wants to destroy this train, which will set the Manhattan Project back and give Germany time to develop the bomb before the United States. And unfortunately, he's successful. He is not able to put a bomb on the train, but he does have a redundancy. A bomb on the tracks. It blows up the bridge that the tracks are on. The train goes plummeting, and everyone except for Lobster Johnson dies, including his sidekick. And then we move on to the modern day, which I guess is like 2000 2001, 2002, something like that. Closer to the modern day. I mean, obviously this is a while ago in real life, but hey, what you gonna do? But there was a ghost train plaguing Colorado, and there are these soldiers running around looking for something. They're looking for that Nazi. That mofo is still alive and in hiding. And eventually, they find him, but he has this mystical device that can project his aura onto someone else it's attached to. So he attaches it to Liz Sherman, and the ghosts think she's him because, you know, they're looking for someone's spiritual energy. But there's another ghost there. A ghost that has helped out the B.P.R.D. before. Lobster friggin' Johnson. And he is able to hold the soldiers back so that Roger can destroy the device and save Liz. And of course, you know, those Nazis, that Nazi bastard gets dragged away by the choo-choo, which I would have liked to see more of. I would have liked to see him go kicking and screaming. But, hey, you only got so many pages, right? But this story is kind of the nail in the coffin between the kind of tension between Liz and Roger. She really doesn't feel that tension towards him very much at all. She kind of got over it real quick. Roger has felt guilty about what he did to her for a long time, and she was like, Roger, I let you do that to me. I let my energy flow into you. I could have stopped it, but I was sick of being out of control, and I was just ready to rest. But she has moved past that. She has control over her powers and her depression, and Roger has much more control over himself as well. So now they're best buddies, and they can put the past to rest. Fun. The next story is called Something Under My Bed. It's about monsters under the bed. Yeah, of course. And this one, to be completely honest, it's not my favorite. It's really basic. It's kind of predictable. Monsters under the bed, kidnapping children, and there's this whole thing about, oh, being physically monstrous doesn't make you a monster. It's your actions that define you. Batman Begins, blah, 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 whatever, whatever. And the art's fine. The art's good. And some of the monsters under the bed are drawn in this very strange way, this cartoony way almost, that doesn't match everyone else, which kind of makes them feel more alien. It's very interesting. And they're like toys that were left in an abandoned toy store that have like become spirits because they feel like children left them to die, even though so now they're gonna harm children. But one of the monsters has kind of befriended the boy that he's with. The boy was never that afraid of him, and eventually got over that fear, and now he's like the boy's protector, and the boy is able to take him home, and they live together, and he's gone from being a monster under the bed to more of an imaginary friend kind of thing. It's really just a very predictable book. Also, I think we're in 2004 now in the real world, but I don't know if the years have progressed that far within the world of B.P.R.D. But this next one is written by Mike Mignola, though the art is not by him. This is a zombie story. We have these zombies running around, and there appears to be a fiendish being who has come back to life in this cathedral, and he's possessed this man, and they take him out pretty easily. It's very short. They just knock the dude out with a trank, and it's like, if we trank the body, who's there to possess, you know? It's just a story that shows, I guess, that there are routine missions, but it seems mostly like it's there to fill space. Sorry, Mignola. I liked it, but it seems kind of fillery. Anyhow, now we move into the big story of the volume, right? Like, almost the entire second half of this is Plague of Frogs, which is the first, like, big B.P.R.D. story. It kind of picks up where Seed of Destruction left off, because Seed of Destruction had those frog people, and now the frog people are back, and they are ready to spread the eldritch word. This is also written by Mike Mignola, with art by Guy Davis, colors by Dave Stewart, and letters by Clem Robbins. And let me tell you, this is an excellent story, an excellent big story to end the omnibus on. Though I do believe there are trade collections of just this, if you want just this story, but I really do recommend these omnibuses. I think they're fairly priced, and they're really high-quality books. I have them digitally, and my partner has them physically. So it's one of those things where we actually do that for a lot of books. And I have some copies of stuff that's physical, and then I also have a digital copy, like All-Star Superman and Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, my favorite stuff, and Hellboy is one of our favorites, so. Yeah, Plague of Frogs. Let's get into it, huh? So, this professor, Professor Derby, goes to visit someone named Dr. Platt, who seems to work for the B.P.R.D. They have this giant mushroom, and the visiting professor murders the doctor and does everything he can to free the shroom. But he does get blasted while trying. And Abe Sapien is having these weird dreams, and they seem to connect him to his past, because no one knows Abe Sapien's past, including him. They found him in a big tube in a basement, and he doesn't know where he's from, and neither does anyone else. But by the end of this, we're going to start learning. Yeah. So Johann, Liz, Roger, and of course Abe are all chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool, and they end up having a mission to go on. Yeah. They figure out about this professor that came and killed a scientist, but then the big fungus, once it was freed by a hail of gunfire hitting the glass, kind of took possession of the professor, and now they have to go into the compound and figure out what's going on here, you know? So they walk in, and they find a body, the one who was shot, the doctor who was shot, and it turns out that the people here are turning into frog people. The mushrooms are turning people into frogs. Abe knows exactly how big of a deal this is. He does not take it lightly. They blast these froggies, and then they have to follow the escaped mushrooms to a small town that they appear to have completely taken over. They've turned everyone in this town into a frog person. There's this unknown kind of priest who appears to still be human, and then there's this being under a shroud, and this being is, of course, the mushroom-mutated doctor from earlier. He now carries the shroom as his body to spread the word and to spread the metamorphosis of the froggies. Roger is pretty quickly taken out by this big frog. It seems like when children are turned to frogs, they actually turn into bigger, more horrific frogs with these big tusks. And I'm basing that assumption not just on this book, because there is a little girl that turns into a much bigger, much deadlier one in here, but also based on some things that happen in Volume 2, where we see another little girl who was turned into a frog, and she is also a bigger, crazier type of frog. So I feel like children are turned into more horrific frogs, which is fucked. It's actually quite fucked. But yeah, Roger is hung. Luckily, he's a homunculus, and they will be able to bring him back. But they go into this church after their helicopter crashes, and they are able to face this man and many of the frogs, even though they have to fight back against psychic powers. One of their pilots is killed, but the other is, unfortunately, turned into a frog. Sadly. Johann's suit is torn apart, so he can't do anything to the frogs physically anymore, and they send him out of the church to kind of banish him, and he has to go find a new vessel or he'll dissipate into the wind. But Liz, even though the psychic frogs are battering her mind to try to keep her from using her pyrokinetics, is able to get some control over the candles in the church and burn the big mushroom man to the ground. It seems like there was some escapage, though. Some corpses come up out of the ground, and Kate has to blast them, but, of course, Liz goes to help, and this is where Liz starts to get just OP. For a while, Liz is just incinerating every threat. She is crazy powerful, just absolutely incinerating corpses. You got Abe Sapien running around, and he finds some newspaper clippings about a miracle boy that's able to heal people. And it turns out his healing was sent by an eldritch being, not by Yahweh, or whatever. But we also see some Rasputin connection, because, Rasputin was trying to bring this same being, this child of the dragon, into the world to kind of reboot it, and they're still trying to do the same thing. So this old man, it turns out, is an artificially aged by the eldritch beings miracle boy. And we will see this being create more miracle children, but when they cure you, they turn you into a frog. That doesn't seem to be what he was doing before, but now that this horrible eldritch god has been brought into the world, being cured turns you into a frog. Oops. Oopsie daisy. Anyhow, Abe Sapien gets stabbed through the chest, and many of the frogs escape and take human form, and they run around turning other people into frogs. Yeah. Luckily, Johann is able to possess some roadkill. Trigger warning, it is a dog, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, he tries to save Abe, and Abe kind of tries to let himself fade away, but he has this kind of mystical flashback as to his origins. He sees this ancient aquatic temple with this strange aquatic being that forms into this big crystal pod thing. He sees a diver take the pod, and then this society of elderly men are studying it and chanting, and when one picks it up, he seems to somehow be infected, and he's able to see Abe's spirit watching them. It's almost like a weird time loopy kind of thing. And Abe's spirit possesses him, so this could just be metaphorical. And then over time, it seems, while he's in a tube, he turns into Abe Sapien and loses all his memories, and his friends die, and he's left in this tube. They were actually, after he transformed, they were taking care of him in the tube, which is cool of them, that they saw him turn into a monster, and they were like, oh, we have to make sure that he's safe and able to breathe and no one can hurt him. Very cool of them. You had good friends in your first life, Abe. Of course, they bring Roger back, and Abe starts to want to learn more about his past and this man that he used to be before he changed. Of course, then we get the Mignola sketchbook in the back. I love the Mignola sketchbooks that are included in these omnibuses. They are really incredible. I love seeing Mignola's process, and they have little text snippets in them that talk about the process as well. Very helpful. Really excellent stuff. And there's a lot of images of Hellboy in the back, despite the fact that he really has only a few appearances in the very beginning as flashbacks. But yes, really, really an incredible book. So that is it for B.P.R.D. Omnibus Volume 1 by Mike Mignola and Christopher Golden, as well as many, many, many other talented people. Thank you all very much for your support. Please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Check out all the cool links in the description below, Facebook, Twitter, etc. I don't know when we will be reviewing B.P.R.D. Omnibus Volume 1. I have almost finished reading it, but I don't know when I'll review it. I'm still doing my first read-through, so we'll have to see. That's it. Thank you all once again. See you all next time. Bye for now.